بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وزد على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد صلاة تفتح لنا بها أبواب الرضا والتيسير وتغلق بها أبواب الشر والتعسير أنت مولانا فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Good to see you. What do you want out of today? Next half an hour, 40 minutes on loneliness or how to spend time when you're on your own. What do you want? You know why I'm asking this, don't you? I said it last time. Do you remember? What did I say? The problem with speakers is that we just yap on and sometimes you can miss the mark. So what do you want out of today? 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or otherwise I'll just yap on, I could miss the mark. What do you hear? It would benefit these.
One is obviously we don't realise how being alone is a blessing, right?
Hmm.
One. And number two is a lot of people don't know how to deal with loneliness, which a lot of people face, especially in the day of social media, where
Yeah.
you may end up being left alone.
Yeah.
And everyone is also obviously just being distracted by their devices.
Yeah.
Whereas being alone and having seclusion is a blessing. Also, Allah is one recommendation of revealed to him. So understanding the blessing aspect and obviously being grateful for that to Allah and making use of it.
Yeah. 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 Anything else?
I think sometimes you can, as a man, you can also feel lonely, but you're not lonely, so you're not physically lonely, but because you're busy with family and you're busy with just normal manly chores or fatherhood, etc.
Yeah.
Your mental capacity you can actually be lonely.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
physically.
Yeah.
So it's knowing how to recognise that and deal with that.
Yeah, a lot of men experience that.
Yeah.
They just plough on through the duties of life. Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a bit too late when it all pops up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's dealing with that, I suppose.
Okay, that's good. Really.
So my question is essentially, like, say, you know, as you get older, you get busier and things, you have your daily routine, your work, your family and all of that, is what to do when you're, say you've done your salah, you've prayed your Quran, and you're lonely and you've got nothing to do, how best to use your time wisely?
That's good.
I found that I struggle because, again, with the mention of social media, like, I have to find words and validation and kind of like a need to have contact with others and
To validate yourself.
yeah, and then I feel a bit lost without it, and yeah, my mind.
No. So you mean like an external validation?
Yeah, yeah, from other people, and not being at peace with being on my own.
Yeah. How can you be content just being on your own? Yeah, that's actually really, really important. Are you okay, Mona? How are you? Are you okay? I don't think I've seen you since you came to my house.
Probably.
Have I? MashaAllah. MashaAllah. So, well, I was going to, that's good. Yeah, I'm going to cover a lot of these things and some more things that have come up, but I'm going to try and split this up into certain sections, and then I prefer it if it's a conversation. Is that all right? I'm asking as if you've got a choice. So generally, I mean, if you look at the data in this country, there's no agreed statistic. It ranges from 10% to about 40% of adults complain of being lonely on their own, and it's affecting them negatively psychologically. And interestingly, it's more young people, so young adults between the ages of 20 and 40, and it's more common in women than men, that concept of I'm just alone. So if you look at it from, so let me switch my GP hat on, what do I see? Usually it's people with a mental health problem where they end up, because there's a massive stigma in all cultures with having a mental health problem. So what happens then, because they're drowning in that emotional state, it's extra harder for them to engage with a human being. So it's easier for them to just shy away and keep themselves to themselves, which is negative for them, but they can't see it. It's just easier for them. So you've got the mental health issue of why people isolate themselves. And I don't know if anybody resonates with this, but we're living in a world now where a human being can externally show that they're super busy, super rich, super successful, super happy, super everything. It's like a filter that they put on their Instagram, Twitter, X, Facebook, whatever you want to call it. But actually inside they're actually really, really, like they've got life figured out, but they haven't. So you've got that aspect, which then causes them to actually just slip into loneliness. And then you've got people who don't necessarily have a mental health problem, but their life is really, really toxic. So I'll give you an example. This happened last week. A brother came to me asking me for help. Both his parents are alcoholics. So it happens with Muslims, unfortunately. Both his parents are alcoholics, so they drink a lot. So when they drink a lot, they're just very angry all the time, and the home situation isn't nice. So what does he do? He goes and isolates himself in his bedroom. He struggles with work, not because he can't work, but it's that concept of, I don't want to do a job which is just mind-numbing. You know, I'm making money for somebody else, and it's not actually progressing me anyway in my life. So he struggles to stay in work. So he spends his whole day smoking weed and playing computer games, his entire day. And he chooses to isolate himself because he doesn't want to engage with his parents or the world around him. And life's ticking away. He's in his 20s now. Life's ticking away for him, and he's just in that cycle. But he's not depressed. He's just fed up of being in that type of situation. He can't see a way out. So then what some people do, they just close in because of the toxic environment that they've got, and then they just go into their bedroom and lock themselves in. So they're the two broad categories that we see in clinic. But then if you look at a wider social trend that we're seeing with younger people, is that it's easier for them to have a relationship with people on their phone than it is with having, human interaction. So next time, try it. If you go to Asda or wherever you shop, Aldi, etc., right? And if you look at someone who's in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you're buying something from them, they'll have eye contact, and they'll hold a conversation with you. They'll be the ones that say, "Hey, how are you? How's your day?" And you reciprocate. You get a young person, I guarantee you, they won't be able to hold a conversation with you. They won't do eye contact. Then they won't be able to have how are you? Fine. There'll be no how are you. Whereas if you were to have a conversation with that person on a text message or WhatsApp, you'd get reels and reels and reels, and you're laughing because you recognize this, Mona, don't you? Reels and reels and reels, because they can't do human interaction. And so they freak out when it's time to interact with people. And then what's the human nature thing to do when you something isn't nice for you? What do? You just draw back, pull away. It's easier for me to be on my own because it's too taxing for me to engage with somebody else. So these are sort of social things that we're seeing happening. So anybody who, if this is you, or if you know somebody who's in this situation, so if there's a mental health problem, really, really important to get them to seek help through professionals. So tend to go to the GP, or they can self-refer to a psychological therapist. Wherever you are in the country now, you can self-refer to a therapist to seek help. If it's someone who's going through a toxic situation and they're just drawing away, then again, take that person for professional help, because there are ways out of this. And then young people, we'll come to young people, inshallah, in a sec. But like what Mona was saying, it's not necessarily a bad thing being alone. I want to ask you a question. What's the difference between loneliness and solitude?
One's negative, so if you're lonely,
Yep.
it sounds like it's got a negative connotation to it. If solitude, you're choosing to be on your own.
Yeah. How does anybody else understand the word solitude?
One's physical, like solitude is physically being on your own, whereas loneliness is more of a feeling.
Yeah, because you could be here, but still feel empty and lonely, couldn't you? And so in our tradition, Actually, solitude is massive, huge. The Prophet ﷺ, before Wahi came to him, there was something drawing him. Like he could not tolerate what was going on in Mecca with worshipping idols. He couldn't tolerate it. And something was stirring in his blessed heart. And then for months and months, he'd go to the cave of Hira. And he'd just be in seclusion. He'd just be in what? Seclusion, looking for the truth. And there's some hikmah in that. Who used to deliver his food? Khadija. Has anybody been to Hira and climbed it?
Yeah.
Khadija would climb that. Like, mashallah, and there's a lesson for women that sometimes when your other half, when your man, your husband needs that space, it's all right. So Khadija gave that to the Prophet ﷺ. You see that? It's okay. Like, so sisters who are listening, like, that's prophetic. You get me? You guys thinking, mashallah, I'm glad you said that. I hope my wife's listening on this thing. Click that bit. But the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, he wasn't wasting his time. You see that?
Mullah Habib likes man caves.
But he wasn't wasting his time. He was looking for the truth. So there's a great hikmah in that. And so one thing I want to go through is just a snippet from Minhajul Abidin by Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali.
I request any Arabic terms can translate in English.
I will, of course, yeah, we'll go through it, inshallah. Which one did I say?
Hikmah.
Wisdom. Hikmah is wisdom. Jazakallah khair. Hikmah is wisdom. So we're going to go through, this was Imam al-Ghazali's last book that he wrote. Minhajul Abidin, the way of the worshippers. Ila Jannati Rabbil Alameen, to the paradise of the Lord of the world. So Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he has a wonderful story. Wonderful story. He was one of the greatest scholars of all time. So if you wanted to go to his class, you had to be a top-ranking scholar. Otherwise you just won't get in. So he didn't have students in his class. He had what? Great scholars who'd come to his class, right? And students wouldn't even be able to get in. Like, it's not even a question, you just won't get in. He held the highest seat in Baghdad when Islam was, at its peak. And what happened to him was, our Sheikh Yusuf Mutala, rahimahullah, apologies in advance, you're going to hear a lot about him because he was beloved to me, rahimahullah. He said that once Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, was leading the prayer, he was the Imam. And his brother was called Ahmed, Imam Ahmed, but he was very into his nasheeds. So he'd spend most of his time singing. So Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, used to criticize him. And he used to say to him, stop just, singing nasheeds all the time. Come to a class and learn something proper. And Imam Ahmed would be like, nah, yeah, forget you, man. I'm carry on with my nasheed. So once Imam Ghazali was leading the prayer, and Ahmed, his brother, came and he joined the prayer a bit late, and then he broke out of his prayer, and then he went to the side and did his own prayer. So after the prayer, Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he turned around to do adhkar, and he could see that his brother was in the corner praying. So he called his brother over and he said to him, what are you doing? And his brother Ahmed said, I don't pray behind people who think about their donkeys who've gone missing. So Imam Ghazali's face went, how did you? He said, my donkey went missing. How did you know that my donkey? He said, look. Then he said to him, إِلَى مَتَى تَسْمَعْ وَلَا تُسْمَعْ إِلَى مَتَى تَهْدِي وَلَا تُهْدَى. For how long are you going to make people listen to the reminder, but you don't listen? And for how long are you going to show people guidance, but you don't take guidance yourself? That's what he said. And then he walked off, and Imam Ghazali, his whole world collapsed in front of him. So he said he had a moment of crisis. And what did he realize? He realized I had zero sincerity, zero ikhlas in my standing as a scholar. That I did it all just to be known. I did it all to be what? To be known. So he said then, after that conversation, it was time for me to go class. So I went to class and I sat down on the chair, and imagine there would be hundreds of ulama in front of him, scholars, great scholars, and he'd be teaching. So he sat on his chair and he said, I couldn't say Bismillah. My lips wouldn't move. Because I realized I had no ikhlas and I did it all just to be known. And then he left, and then he was like, he felt ill. And the doctors came to him and said, we have no idea what's wrong with him, we have no idea what the cure is. And then he spoke to the governor and he said, look, so we understand. He said, I'm doing one. He said, I need to get away. I need to sort my head out. How long did anybody know how long he went away for? 12 to 13 years. He went to sort his head out. And he said to his governor, this is my family, you look after them. And he did. And then he went 12 years and he roamed the Muslim lands. And he met some great scholars of that time. And it was during that period he wrote the Ihya Ulumuddin. And then he came back and he taught people the spirit of Islam. The spirit of Islam. His name, look at his name, Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmed. What's his name? Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad. Our Sheikh Yusuf, he had a friend in Portugal and he asked him, what's your name? He said, Muhammad. He says, okay, what's your father's name? He said, Muhammad. He said, what's your grandfather's name? He said, Muhammad. He said, keep going. And he went, Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad, and he went all the way back to the Prophet. And Hazrat said to us, rahimahullah, he said, that wasn't amazing. He goes, what was amazing was that how many fitan, trials and tribulations would those generations have had, but they still called their boys Muhammad. Imam Shafi'i, he had 5 boys. He called them all what? Muhammad. So one of his students said, Sheikh, if you were to call Muhammad at home, how do you know, which one knows who you're calling? So Imam Shafi'i said, that's their problem. He said, if I have 100 boys, if Allah gave me 100 boys, I'd call them all Muhammad. It's the most popular name in England. Isn't it? Most blessed name. So Imam Ghazali, this was the last book he wrote, and what he was really concerned about, rahimahullah, what he was really concerned about was the spirit of Islam. That it's very easy to, on the outward, be pious. You know what I mean? Or you're praying salah, you're reading Quran, you're doing this, you're doing that. But what about what's deep within the heart? So one of the things he talks about is there are certain hurdles that get between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of them he says the second biggest one after shaitan, the second biggest hurdle getting to Allah after shaitan is, have a guess?
Yourself.
Human beings. Khalq. So we'll read a few snippets. He says, may Allah give you and us enabling grace بالتفرد عن الخلق, to just be alone from creation. And then he says, why? He says, أنهم يشغلونك عن عبادة الله عز وجل. It's simple. He said, most people keep you distracted from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Most people keep you distracted from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, not only do they do that, فَالْخَلْقُ إِذَنْ يُشْغِلُونَك عَنِ الْعِبَادَةِ بَلْ يَمْنَعُونَكَ مِنْهَا. Not only do they keep you distracted, some people actually stop you from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, بَلْ, actually rather, يُوقِعُونَكَ فِي الشَّرِّ وَالْهَلَاكِ. In fact, some people actually put you in a predicament of actually doing things that are detestable between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can lead to your destruction. And that's the story of Hatim al-Assam rahimahullah. طلبت من هذا الخلق خمسة أشياء. I tried to seek out 5 things from people. فلم أجدها. I didn't find them. طلبت منهم الطاعة والزهد فلم يفعلوه. I sought from them obedience in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing without this world. Couldn't find it. So I said to my friends, أعينوني عليهما إن لم تفعلوا. That if you can't help me, if you can't do it and you can't help me do it, if you can't do it, at least help me do it. فلم يفعلوا, and they couldn't help me. So I asked them, please be pleased with me. So he said to his friends group, be pleased with me if I was to, engage in Allah's worship and do without the world. They weren't pleased with me. Then he asked them, لا تمنعونني عنهما إذن. At least don't stop me from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not engaging with this world. They wouldn't let me. And then he asked them, don't call me to things that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they called me to what pleased towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so I left them. وَأَعْلَمْ أَيُّهَا الْأَخْ فِي الدِّينِ. And this is a really important statement. So Imam Ghazali is saying, know, O brother of faith. And this carefully. أَنَّ النَّبِيَّ صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, وَصَفَ زَمَانَ الْعُزْلَةِ. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم described the periods of solitude. The time that a human being will live in where it's a time of solitude. وَبَيَّنَ نَعْتَهُ وَنَعْتَ أَهْلِهِ. He described very clearly the period, the time of solitude, when it's important to have solitude, and the people of that time as well. وَأَمَرَ فِيهِ بِالتَّفَرُّدِ. And he categorically said that it's time to be alone. وَكَانَ صلى الله عليه وسلم لَا مَحَالَةَ أَعْلَمَ بِالْمَصَالِحِ. That there's no doubt here that the Prophet ﷺ was the most knowledgeable in what's best for us in terms of rectification. وَأَنْصَحَ لَنَا مِنَّا لِأَنفُسِنَا. And he's more he's more wise and sincere in giving us advice than our own selves. Who? The Messenger. Now this is why some ulama are saying, why is it that we listen to everybody but the Prophet ﷺ in this zamana? Why is it that we listen to everybody but we're not willing to listen to Allah or His Rasul ﷺ? And then he says, look, فَإِنْ وَجَدْتَ زَمَانَكَ عَلَى هَذَا مَا وَصَفَ وَبَيَّنَ. So if you find yourself in a period where the Prophet ﷺ has clearly described it, فَامْتَثِلْ أَمْرَهُ صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then carry out the order of the Prophet ﷺ, وَقْبَلْ نَصِيحَةً, and accept his nasihah. وَلَا تَشَكَّ فِي أَنَّهُ صلى الله عليه وسلم كَانَ أعرف بما يصلح لك في زمانك. The Prophet ﷺ, there's no doubt that he was the most knowledgeable in what's most beneficial in your time. In whose time? He's talking to every time. Okay? And then he says, وَلَا تَتَعَلَّلْ بِالْعِلَلِ الْكَاذِبَةِ. And don't make dumb excuses. Dumb excuses about why we're not doing this. وَلَا تُخَادِعْ نَفْسَكَ. And don't fool yourself. إِلَّا, and this is important, فَأَنْتَ هَالِكٌ وَلَا عُذْرَ لَكَ. Then you'll be destroyed and there's no excuses. So what's the zamana? So he explained, the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, he said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ النَّاسِ مَرِجَتْ عُهُودَهُم. That when you see people breaking their promises, وَخَفَّتْ أَمَانَاتُهُم, not carrying out what's actually entrusted onto them, they just ignore it. Then he said, أَلْزِمْ بَيْتَكَ. So two things he mentioned. When people aren't carrying out what they're entrusted to do, and when people break their trusts, break their oaths, he goes, that's the time of fitan. That's the time of fitan. Then what did he say? Then the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, أَلْزِمْ بَيْتَكَ. Go and stay at home. Stay where? Okay, what do you do at home? And he said, I've read my Quran, I've read my Salah. What do you do at home? وَامْلِكْ عَلَيْكَ لِسَانَكَ. In polite ways, close your mouth. Just zip it. وَخُذْ مَا تَعَرُّفْ وَدَعْ مَا تُنْكِرْ وَعَلَيْكَ بِأَمْرِ الْخَاصَّةِ وَدَعْ عَنْكَ أَمْرَ الْعَامَّةِ. Take from what you know is truth, and leave for what you know is not good. وَعَلَيْكَ بِأَمْرِ الْخَاص. And take the affairs of the elite in your time. Who are the elite in our time? The ulama, the sulaha, the awliya. Take their affairs and leave the affairs of the general public. Jiman. Huh? Did I not do it? Oh, sorry. Yes. So the scholars, the pious, and the saints. Who? Scholars, the pious, and the saints of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's who the Prophet said, take their affairs and leave the affairs of the general public. That's whose advice? That's whose advice? The Prophet. Then he also said another sign of the zamana where we're supposed to just be in solitude. He said, Ayyam al-haraj. And they asked him, what's Ayyam al-haraj? What's haraj? What does that mean? He said, Hina la ya'munu rajulu jalisihi. He said, the days of tribulation is when you're in a period where the person you're sat with, you can't even trust them. The person you're sat with, You can't even trust them. And another narration of haraj, they asked, what's haraj? He said, when you have amul qatl, where just people are being murdered. And and this is am, isn't it? I mean, put war to one side. What's a huge problem that's in our country right now?
Stabbing.
Knife crime. Amul qatl. So these are the times of the Prophet described us, that this is the time of solitude. And then he cites another statement narrated by Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, where he said to him, if you live long enough, فَسَيَأْتِي عَلَيْكَ زَمَانٌ كَثِيرُ الْخُطَبَاء, this is me, you will see in your period lots of people who just yap on and speak. وَقَلِيلُ الْعُلَمَاء, very few scholars. So lots of people will be speakers, but very few scholars. And be careful, because there's some people who are out there and they're saying things that are completely alien to our tradition. And you've all heard it. Completely into our tradition. كَثِيرُ السُّؤَلَاء وَقَلِيلُ الْمُعْتُو, many people who will ask questions, but very people who will actually listen to them and obey. This is our zamana now. So back in the day, when you wanted to get, when a student used to go to a scholar and ask a question, the reason why they went to ask a question was to actually find out a way of how to behave and how to do it. So if a scholar would say, if you go to, I need a fatwa for this, and the scholar would say, you can't do that, they go, fine, that's fine. Khalas, end of conversation. What do? We shop around. To such a degree, we won't even go to someone. What will we do? We'll just Google it. ChatGPT. Really? I don't even know. Is that true? Is that true?
Yeah,
That's the new trend.
And how accurate is ChatGPT with the fatawa?
I mean, fatwa are going to be like there's so much influence of like the geography as well, where the alim is, who's issuing the verdict. Obviously, you won't consider those sorts of things as well.
So people use ChatGPT for
I
fatwa.
think it's the youth, though. People who are not that practiced and they trust it.
Yep.
They'll just take what it says.
Like people would have Googled a few years ago a question. Nowadays they just ChatGPT.
The
There's
people,
referencing them. They do reference it.
man, I'm not having that. I don't care if they're referencing. Right, stop using it. No, stop it. Khalas, Maulana.
I actually learned that from.
End the conversation.
I mean referencing in sense where it might be from another fatwa website.
Yeah.
That's what they
No, you got to be careful like that. Like this isn't a new thing. Like there was a sheikh and he was teaching the hadith. He was teaching hadith, and إذا استجمر فليوتر, when you're going to the bathroom and there's no water and you need to use say tissue. Back in those days they used to use rocks, and then use an odd amount. So one of the students read the hadith without speaking to his teacher about what it means. So he went to the bathroom, and all you could hear from the bathroom was him saying, witr, 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 witr. So that's what they could hear. So when he came out, his friends asked him, what the heck were you doing, bro? He said, it says in the hadith that when you go to the bathroom, you should make witr. So I was in the bathroom, I was going witr, 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 witr. And I said, no, you've completely misunderstood that hadith. Now fast forward to our generation, this was year 2000, one of the shuyukh was telling me that traveller's prayer, what do you do? You shorten it. What do you do for Maghrib?
3.
It's still 3.
3.
So he said he was watching his brother, and he read the first 2 rakats, stood up, and the last rakat he read, the last cycle he read, sat down. So they asked him, what are you doing? He said, well, I get half the reward for if I pray sitting down. So that was the best I could do to shorten my prayer for Maghrib. Do you get me? So that this is not a new thing. But the point he's trying to make is that look at what zamana they're warning us about. Plenty of speakers, but very few ulama. That's our zamana. This is our time. Yeah, plenty of speakers, very few scholars. Plenty of people who ask questions, no one who wants to obey and listen. Al-hawa fihi qa'idul ilm. And caprice is what guides people seeking knowledge. And that's us now. Right? That's ours. So then Ibn Mas'ud asked, when is this going to happen? And then the jawab was, when salah, look at the wording, Umitat salah, when salah is given, janazah, death. And that's why one of the brothers said to me, ulama, he said, if the ummah tomorrow, every single one who it was wajib upon them prayed their salah for five times a day, prayed their salah, just for one day, there'd be no problems in this ummah. Well, yesterday, there was a brother in our masjid, mashallah, this is something to be happy about. He said to me yesterday, alhamdulillah, I've made up 40 years of missed prayers. That's 73,000. How many? 73,000. And this brother, he used to be the first one in and the last one out. And when we used to all leave, are you coming? He'd go, no, I'm just going to do some carpet burning. So I'm like, carpet burning. And I realised what he was doing. He was going up and down. 73,000. I said, Bhaijan, you need to have a party. Like, that's just next level, isn't it? When salah is, وَقُبِلَتِ الرُّشَاء, when people accept bribes. That happens all the time. When people accept bribes. وَيُبَاعُ الدِّينِ بِعَرَضِ يَسِيرِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, and people sell their religion for paltry, small amounts in this world, and you see that now. And that's the time that we live in. And then Imam Ghazali says that when we reach these times, and he said these times have happened before, all the scholars of those times where they've witnessed these elements in their time, they've made it very, very clear that it's preferable to be in a state of solitude than be with the masses. It's preferable. And they actually ordered them to do that as well, and also heavily advised their students to do that. And then he quotes a scholar called Sufyan al-Thawri. He's Abu Hanifa's generation, isn't he? So what year is that, Mawlana? 150 Hijrah. So let's just say 100 years after Hijrah. So Sufyan al-Thawri was saying, Wallahi ladhi, he took an oath by Allah. I swear by Allah, لَقَدْ حُلَّتِ الْعُزْلَ فِي هَذَا الزَّمَانِ, that being in solitude is now absolutely permissible for us to be. Like, this is something that we have to do now. That was in that time. That was in what? In that time. So what the Imam's trying to say is that, look, the zaman is, clearly there. The time that we live in is clearly there. That is time for what? Time for solitude. And then Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he goes on and he quotes again Sufyan al-Thawri saying, Fudayl ibn Iyad, he said, look, in his time, so Fudayl ibn Iyad, what time was he? Oh, yeah. So 100. Fudayl ibn Iyad. Is he?
He was Abu Hanifa's student.
So he was the one who was going to. Yes, and he heard, Alam ya'ni alladhina amanu, ya mashallah. So he was a highway robber, and you know what his job was before he passed away? He used to look after the graveyard of Mecca, and towards the end of his life, he'd mark an X, and he'd say, Ya ilahi hadha al-makan, oh my Lord, this place. And people were like, what are you doing? And when he passed away in the exact same, he was buried in the exact spot where he marked X few years before he passed away. So Fudayl ibn Iyad, great scholar, what did he say? In his time, 100 years after the Hijrah, هذا الزمان احفظ فيه لسانك. This period, hold your tongue, protect your tongue from saying anything. وَخْفِ مَكَانَك. Stay in your house, just hide in your house. Don't go out. وَعَالِجْ قَلْبَك. Cure your heart from any spiritual diseases. وَخُذْ مَا تَعَرُّفْ وَدَعْ مَا تُنْكَرْ. Take from what you know which is good and leave what you believe is to be bad. Sufyan al-Thawri again. هذا الزمان السكوت. This is the time where we just zip it, silence. وَلَزُومُ الْبُيُوتِ. And we stay at home. وَالرِّضَى بِالْقُوتِ. And be satisfied with little, what we just need to get by. Just what we need to get by with. إِلَىٰ أَن تَمُوتْ, until we die. That was that time. Dawood al-Ta'i, one of Abu Hanifa's greatest students, rahimahullah, for 1 year he said to himself, I am not going to speak. For a whole year, He's one of his greatest students. In some time, the greatest student of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He said, for 1 year, I'm not going to speak. Unless it's absolutely dururi. That's how he trained his nafs. What did he say? Sum ani dunya. When you fast from this world, nothing else. Waj'al fitrataka al-akhirah. And make your iftar, your meal after you break your fast, when you pass away. And then he said something ajib. وَفَرَّ مِنَ النَّاسِ فِرَارَكَ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ. Run from people just like you run away from a lion. Run from people just as you run away from a lion. Allahu Akbar. So then Imam Ghazali goes on to say, why is he saying all this? أَنَّ النَّاسِ يُفْسِدُونَكَ عَلَيْكَ مَا. So people will just ruin your relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your path to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the biggest means that he says is that when you meet people, most people are in a state of showing off and beautifying themselves with something that they're not. Most people, when they meet, they're in a state of showing off and beautifying. And he starts a wonderful story.
Nowadays people have filters.
Filters. But listen to it, he cites a story of his sheikh. He says, my sheikh met a pious saint and they spoke to each other. And then my sheikh said to this pious saint, I have not sat in a gathering that has been so beautiful, and I have so much hope for it in the akhirah. So this saint said to him, لكني ما جلست مجلسا أنا له أخوف من مجلس هذا. I've not sat in a gathering where I have so much fear before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he asked him why, and then he said a jumla which is worth listening to. He said, did we not beautify our speech between each other? Did we not beautify our speech between each other? Did we not beautify ourselves in terms of our demeanor between each other? And the Imam Ghazali's Sheikh said, yes, I did too. And then the saint said to him, this is showing off. So what does he do? Meeting people, it's like being two-faced, isn't it? And shirarun nas dhul wajhain. Between who? Between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Imam Ghazali goes on to say, no, this is the time where there's and this is his time, so much tribulation. Dealing with people leads to a lot of harm. At worst, at best, they distract you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At worst, they ruin your path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, it's better for you that you just stay in solitude. That you stay in what? Solitude. Now, how does that make you feel that this is what these people are talking about only 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Hijrah? Like, how does that make you feel when you read that? Share your thoughts.
I think they were more, collectively, they were more self-aware, self-conscious about their state. I think it was something, they weren't distracted as much as us.
Yeah.
Say that whilst being distracted with a device in the hand. Yeah, they weren't as distracted, but they thought, how far have we fallen from the time of the Goga's generation.
You were going to say something?
Just like, what would they say about this time? If they
Yeah.
said that then, if they saw how it is now,
Mm.
what would they say?
Mm.
It's even worse.
Because some of the Sahaba, they'd say to the Tabi'een, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ would say to their students that, we don't recognize you.
Mm.
Imagine if Sahaba were here, companions. Now, haqiqatan, talking about when you're on your own and what you do, one of the big problems are these devices and what you do. Ask yourself this question: if the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was with you right now and he said to you, give me your phone, what's that? It's a phone. Can I have a look? How would you feel? What's this WhatsApp group? Can I have a look? What's this iTunes? What's iTunes? What are you listening to? What are these videos that you've got? What's YouTube? Let me look at your subscriptions and feed. Would you, just think about that. Just, think about that. But it's scary, isn't it, when you read this? So Imam Ghazali goes on to say, okay, then one of his students, because he wrote this with his student, it was actually a response to one of his students' questions. His student asked him, what do I do? Okay, you told me to be on my own. What on earth do I do on my own then? Right? In fact, his student, I've missed a bit because we don't have time, he has a lot of debate with him. He says, well, isn't our religion all about jama'ah and getting together and being with the jama'ah and doing things collectively? Look at Salah, you go to the masjid and you pray in jama'ah, that's more afdal than praying on your own. The Eid, the Hajj, the whole concept of charity, you can't do it on your own, it's all in a group. And Imam Ghazali, we'll talk about where he goes with that, but what he says is, look, how do you spend your time? He said, look, drown yourself in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Drown yourself in what? The worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, how do you understand that?
There's no limit.
Khalas, there's no limit. There's no limit. And what I encourage you to do, look, I've shown you this before, I don't have one. Right? I've never had one, inshallah, I hope I never get one. But I guarantee you, if you just get one of these babies, right? I guarantee you, you will have bags of time. I'm telling you, you will have bags of time. I know a brother, mashallah, Hafidhul Quran, every day he reads 20 juz, 20. So the Quran split into 30 parts. He reads 20 a day with no mushaf. He works at a post office and he files the letters here and there, and in his head, every day he reads 20 juz, 20 paras, 20 parts. There's another brother, he's in South Africa. In the morning, he drives, taking, from the clinic, you get blood from the family clinic, like a GP, so in South Africa, the family doctor, and then it goes to the hospital. So he just drives all day, taking these blood samples from hospital to clinic back and forth. He said, I leave my house at 8 o'clock, and I start with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I get home at 5 o'clock, and I'm on Surah Nas every single day without the need of Musaf. Ajib, isn't it? I know another brother, this is who, not here, but amongst us, like in our community. He went through a phase where he was reading 100 nafil a day on top of normal salah. 100. Because he loved it. Just worshipping Allah. There's another brother, very pious, if I remember correctly. He reads the Dalail Khairat every day, cover to cover. Dalail Khairat is a beautiful book on salawat, sending peace and blessings on the Prophet. You see where I'm going with this? See where I'm going with this? Ibadat. Why do we not like ibadat? The nafs doesn't like it. Because it's hard on the nafs. The nafs doesn't like it. What about Ramadan? How easy is it? It's true, isn't it? Ramadan's very easy, isn't it? Because the nafs is woken up a little bit. The soul's woken up and there's no shayateen. But what does he say? He says, drown yourself. Yani make yourself so busy in ibadat, in worship, you don't have time for anybody or anything else. There was one brother, whenever you saw him, wherever he was, he'd have the Quran open and he'd be reading Quran, wherever you were. So once our Sheikh Yusuf came to give a bayan in the masjid, in his masjid, and so I had a habit of sitting very close to Sheikh Yusuf when he was giving his bayan, wherever he was, right? So I'm at the front, and this brother's near the mimbar, and Sheikh Yusuf is giving a bayan, and he's reading Quran. Throughout the whole bayan, he's reading Quran. The same brother, and Sheikh Yusuf didn't say anything to him. Hazrat said nothing to him. The same brother, Sheikh Yusuf gave him a gift of 4 or 5 books that he wrote, right? And the brother said to Sheikh Yusuf, he said to him, if I read these books, how am I going to read Quran? You're distracting me from Quran. Right? You and I, if we authored books, us snowflakes, we'd get offended at that. He said, that is beautiful. You carry on reading Quran. Forget my books. You see that? So he said, number one, what do you do? And to help you enter that state of solitude, he said, just drown yourself. Assalamu alaikum. Drown yourself in the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm telling you, if you just, why don't you try it before Ramadan? Just have a day. I mean, I don't know this because I don't have one, but my brother was telling me, you can get this app on your phone where it blocks off every single app apart from messaging and phone. Is that right? Huh?
Yeah, you can, no, it's a setting.
It's a setting on your phone, right, where you just have messages and phone. You know, like what a phone's supposed to be, right? Messages and phone, right? Focus mode. Okay, whatever it is, right? Why don't you try it for a day? Why don't you what? Try it for a day. Why is this important? Why is this important? In Imam al-Nawawi's 40 hadith, he cites one, and there's ulama here, there's scholars here who can recognize it. Like, when does Allah say in a hadith qudsi that He loves someone? What is it that they do that causes love to fall upon them? Nothing. Optional worship. That a slave does not come close to me with anything greater than what I've made obligatory upon them. And he continues to draw closer to me until through nawafil, through optional acts, until I love him. And then when I love him, I become the eye that he sees from, the hand that he reaches out from, the steps that he takes, the words that come out of his mouth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what does that mean? It means that Allah protects that human being from destruction. But what did he say? That a slave draws closer to Allah through what means? Worship. And that's why it's really, really important to actually enter this state of, and Allah rewards Shaykh Yusuf Rahim, Allah rewarded something that he was very... And then Imam Ghazali says, when you do that, when you start worshipping Allah, and you give it its due, he said, وَجَدْتَ حَلَاوَةُ الْمُنَاجَاتِ, you'll find the sweetness of engaging with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why some of the scholars, some of the saints of the past, they would have so much joy in worshipping Allah, so much joy. Some of them would just sit there like this. They wouldn't even say anything. They'd sit there like this. Not one word would come out of their mouth because of the amount of joy they'd have just sitting there knowing that they've got a Lord that they're raising their hands to. Try it. You might find it. And then he says, that's number one. Number two, what's really, really important and what will help you reach solitude, and this is where it gets a bit offensive, but not, because we're just snowflakes, aren't we? I mean, we should be able to take it. He says, cut yourself off from having any thought that that other person will bring you any benefit. And then he says, because most of other people, the business that they do with you, the dealings that they do with you is just pointless. Most people's dealings with each other is pointless. And then he says, take it to another level. لا ترجو نفعه. Don't even think or have any hope that that person will benefit you. ولا تخاف ضره. And don't fear what's perceived as their harm towards you. Then what you will find is that you will realize that there's no benefit in people. Ultimately, there's no benefit in people because a lot of the dealings is just pointless. And then he says, number three, what will help you is look at the faults of people and play that in your heart over and over again, and the faults of yourself as well. And then what that will do, that will detest for you having any intimate companionship with anybody else because of your own faults and their own faults as well. And then you'll realize that actually what you would prefer is to break away, be on your own, li'ibadatihi subhanahu wa ta'ala, just to be in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and staying at home. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. So when you ask, does that make sense about the need for solitude in this time? Because what it will do, it will protect a human being from so much harm, especially the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not like, there's no hard and fast rules. What do you do when you're on your own is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if someone say, well, I've prayed my salah, like I read my Quran, read more. Nothing stopping you. There was a brother, he got bored during COVID. In 9 months he memorized the Quran. 9 months he memorized the Quran. There was a sister, 140 days she memorized the Quran. 140 days she memorized the Quran. Do more. And that's like what do I do? No, switch this off. And I'm going to engage in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like we do in Ramadan. where you take it to another level. You take it, and what you will discover is that the more you do, you realize the more capacity you have to do. And then Allah opens one door, then another door, then another door, then another door. Before you know it, your whole day is filled. You don't have time. Has anybody seen the khulasa of Habib Umar? Hafidahullah. Like when I read that, khulasa is what he gives to his students in terms of what their daily worship is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I read that, I thought, man, you got no time for nothing else. But that's the way. You understand? That's the way. And you're probably thinking, oh, that's rock hard. It's not. Just get rid of this. It's really simple. If you get rid of your phones, you'd have bags of time to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, Chris, you were talking about being validated. What happens is that the need for validation from others usually is because we don't feel validated actually with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What validates a human being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the actual relationship with Him. And the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worship. Is ibadah. You look at every great scholar of the past, they were deep worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Deep worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You could choose anybody. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah didn't miss Qiyam al-Layl for 40 years. How many? 40 years. For 40 years he had the same wudu for Isha and Fajr. Imam Shafi was well known for reading one Quran a day. Well known. Mashhur he was for that. And so it's important. But then I read something, and we'll finish with this inshallah. This is from Habib Abu Bakr al-Adni Ibn Ali al-Mashhur. He passed away now. He's one of the great students of Habib Abdul Qadir al-Saqaf rahimullah, great scholar of Yemen. So Habib Abdul Qadir was a mountain, rahimullah, absolute mountain. And some of our teachers told us stories about him. And let me make it clear, he was raised without television, phones, that generation. Right? Listen to 3 stories that we were told. Once, someone came he was teaching, and someone came into the mosque, and as he opened the book, and as he was about to start the class, somebody stood up and said, "You're this, you're that, you're involved with bid'ah. This is wrong. You're wrong. What you're saying is wrong. You should be ashamed of yourself. This and that. This and that." And he went on and on and on and on. And Sheikh Abdul Qadir told his students to not respond to him. Don't respond to him. And he listened and he listened and he listened. And then he said, "Have you finished?" He said, "Yes." And he closed the book and he said, "Ikhwan, brothers, this is today's dars." Didn't say a word. What would we do? But be honest, what would we do? Kick off. You'd have a fight with the guy. Didn't say a word because this is the class. The next day the brother came back and apologized. I was completely wrong. Number 1. Number 2, he helped a very rich, wealthy man out in Jeddah. Very wealthy man. And in response, this was in the 70s, he gave him 1 million riyals. How many pounds is that? About $250,000? Yeah? Well, actually, the rates were probably... but that's a lot of money, isn't it? So he gave it to him at Fajr. He had a driver. So Sheikh Abdul Qadir said to him, "Let's go. There's a widow over there. There's someone who's homeless over there. There's a faqir over there." He travelled the whole of Jeddah, and in one day he gave away 1 million riyals. How many? Didn't keep 1 riyal for himself. And his driver said, "That didn't amaze me, because I knew that he was like that. What amazed me more is that he knew where every single faqir, poor person was in Jeddah. Every single one." Third story, he came out of a class and he went to his car, and somebody was following him, asking him questions. He ushered him into the car, still was asking questions. So Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Saqaf pulled the window down, and he was still talking to him for about 15 minutes. And then he drove off, and Habib Ali was with him, Habibullah, and he drove off for about 5-10 minutes, and then he asked the driver to stop the car. He stopped the car, and then he said to Habib Ali, "Ali, open the door, my hand's stuck." What? My hand's stuck in the door. He kept his hand stuck in the car door for 25 minutes. So Habib Ali said to him, "Why did you not?" He goes, "I didn't want to upset that brother. He was a person who had a need." This was someone who wasn't raised by these things. What do you notice about those 3 stories? What do you notice? You know, we talked about at the beginning about the ruh, the spirit of this religion. These things suck it out of you. You know that? One brother said that the moment you switch these on, you switch off from Allah. The moment you switch these on, you switch off from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he writes, what do you do? So we're in a period where a lot of scholars are saying, stay in solitude, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what about people who are drowning outside? What, we're just going to leave them? We're just going to leave them? And the answer to that is clearly no. So he says, there's a hadith narrated by Imam Tirmidhi where he calls it the good initiatives at the end of time. The good initiatives at the end of time. And he refers to a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ narrated by Tirmidhi saying, hasten to do good deeds before you're overtaken by one of the 7 afflictions. One of the 7. And then he said, what? Are you waiting for poverty that will make you unmindful of devotion? In other words, you're so busy trying to earn, you have no time for ibadah, for worship. Or prosperity that will make you corrupt? The opposite. You become so rich, you feel like you don't need to. Or disease that will disable you. You're so ill, you can't do anything. Or old age that will make you mentally unstable, too feeble to do anything. Or sudden death, or it's too late. Or Dajjal, who is the worst of expected absentees, or the hour, yani Yawm al-Qiyamah. And the hour will be like the last day, the day of judgment, and the hour will be most grievous and most bitter. So then the Shaykh Rahimullah, he explains, okay, what are the 7 things to get involved with in the end of times? And our zamana, basically. Yes, solitude, be engaged with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ibadah, deep ibadah. But he says also do these 7 things. Number 1, start an initiative to treat poverty that leads people to heedlessness. This is a kind of poverty that envelopes the world due to unfair economic policies. Have you heard of Islamic finance guru?
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are next level, aren't they? What they're trying to do, mashallah, what a good initiative. Trying to uplift, people out of poverty, not because of it's important to be rich. They're not doing it for that. They're doing it so that people have some form of financial stability, so they're not distracted with just work, so they can engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see that? Number 2, an initiative to address corrupting prosperity, which is also widespread. This can happen through addressing the failure of interest-based economy. Again, look what Islamic Finance Guru are doing. They're trying to, so I was with one of the directors a few weeks ago, and he said, we just want people to open their eyes to the problems with interest. And if we can get people to stop dealing with interest, our job is done. Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. An initiative to address debilitating diseases of all forms, whether it's spiritual, so what you guys are doing with links, mashallah, or whether it's physical, what I'm doing, trying to improve people's, well-being, basically, including, this made me laugh, awareness about correct foods and eating habits. Alhamdulillah. Number 4, an initiative to help old people. An initiative to what? To help old people. Let me tell you a story. It was Christmas, right? I got a call out to a lady. I have to change her name because we can't, because of confidentiality, right? Let's just say her name's Bethel, right? Very old English name, right? She called me out on Christmas Eve. Went to her house. Bethel, what's up? She's blabbering away. I can't make any sense of what's wrong with her. Like, her symptoms don't follow. What she's saying to me doesn't follow a typical clinical picture of an illness. I said, Bethel, what's wrong with you? She started crying now. She goes, nothing's wrong with me. I said, I'm lonely. I said, what? It's Christmas. She goes, yeah, I'm lonely. I said, where's your family? She said, they don't want to know. I said, they're not coming for Christmas. She said, no. Because they told me they're going to come a few days after. And she's crying. So I said, come on, Beth, we'll put the kettle on. There's loads of pictures here. Tell me some stories. She got so happy. She did. She's got someone to talk to. Hey, but jokes aside, this is happening in our culture now. I'm telling you. I went to a masjid. I won't say where because I don't want people to cotton on. and I was at one of my health talks, and this old man came up to me afterwards, and he said, I need some advice. I said, what's up? And he's crying. And he said, my kids, I gave them everything. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I sacrificed I've got 3 kids, boys, girls, I've got 3 altogether. I sacrificed everything for them, grafted, worked my butt off, got them into the best schools, paid for them through university, set them up with it on the housing ladder, got them onto a property basically. Mashallah, they've got kids and grandchildren, this and that. I said, that's good. Why are you crying? He goes, they don't want to know me. Because I never see them. They're too busy. You know, we see that now, where people are just on their own. So set up an initiative. One of the 7 at the end of time. You're just an old person's initiative. You know, there's a befriending group for old people now because it's a crisis in this country. Where on the phone, so we get this at work. You got old people, they're very lonely, so you've got age concern, but you've also got Cyril Flint, which is like a befriending service. Over the phone they have somebody to talk to. Because they're lonely, but this is happening in our culture as well. So this is one of the initiatives that he talks about. Don't abandon them. A initiative to strengthen family ties. How many divorces do we see now? 1 in 3. Initiatives to help that. That's a good thing. And then the 5th one I won't talk about. The 6th one, raising awareness about the signs of end of time and teaching people what to do and how to behave with themselves towards the end of time. Set up initiatives for that. Initiative to prepare for Yawm al-Qiyamah. And what's the first Qiyamat? Our death. The first judgment is our own death. So setting up initiatives for people to prepare for their own death is beneficial. And then the Shaykh says, rahimullah, these 7 initiatives will protect from deviation or at least alleviate the effects of tribulations. These 7 will protect from deviation, as in going off on a tangent, or at least alleviate the effects of tribulations. These initiatives will spread the spirit of optimism and empower people to think positively regardless of their circumstances. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, if the final hour comes while you have a palm cutting in your hands and it's possible to plant it, then you should plant it. In other words, if you have a seed that you want to plant and Yawm al-Qiyamah is around the corner, plant it. We're not, plant it, keep going. So in summary, I'll ask you, in summary, what did you learn?
Importance of ibadah.
Really important to be a deep abid. I remember asking Hazrat Yusuf Sahib about this, and he said it's not for everybody to become a scholar, but it's for everybody to become a worshipper. It's not for everybody to become a scholar, but it's for everybody to become a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a deep worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that was the hallmark of all our greats from the past. So when you're it's important to be in states of solitude. I'm not saying now break up your friendship on the way out the door. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if there's periods of distraction between you and your friendship, for example, let's go out let's go to the pictures, what's the benefit? Really. So if you're finding that there's moments like that, it might be better to break away. Not end your friendship, but say this is my time to engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar ibn Asad used to say to his students, خُذُوا بِحَظِّكُمْ مِنَ الْعُزْلَةِ. Take a portion for yourself of solitude. Take a portion for yourself of solitude. So have portions of solitude where what you do in those moments is engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then what did we learn from this? Don't just be on your own. Engage in some form of initiative that brings people closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ideally the 7. And bas, inshallah, until we die, biggest thing is to protect our iman. Biggest masla is to protect our iman. And inshallah, these are the means to protect our iman in periods of time that we're living in. Allah save us, Allah save us, Allah save us. There was a brother when we were in uni, and he was out clubbing, and he was drunk. And some of his friends said that in the middle of the club, he was dancing around, and then all of a sudden he just started screaming and running like someone who was hallucinating. He was running around the dance floor saying, "Leave me alone, go, leave me alone, don't come near, don't come near," and then gone, passed away. And so we asked the shiur, who said, "What was that?" He said he would have seen Malak al-Maut in that state. But then when we're going to go, how we're going to go. But then when it's time, kick ourselves. Mawlana Hussain Ahmad Rahimahullah, he told a story of two brothers who they used to give the azan, the call to prayer in where? Medina Munawwara. And one of them was on his deathbed. This is someone who used to call the call to prayer in Medina Munawwara. He was on his deathbed, and his family were telling him to say La ilaha illallah, say La ilaha illallah, say La ilaha illallah. And he just wouldn't say it. So then they brought the Quran to him to say, read some Quran before you're going to die. So he picked up the Quran and he just launched it. And he said, there's your La ilaha illallah and there's your Quran. He passed away. And his younger brother became the mu'adhin, the one who did the call to pray in Medina Munawwara, Masjid Nabawi. When he was his deathbed, he asked for a Quran. His family were like, don't give it to him. We're not giving it to you. But he was like, no, give me a mushaf. I need to read Quran before I die. Eventually they gave it to him. He opened the mushaf, read a portion of the Quran, put it on his chest, and then passed away. Two brothers, same city, same job, two completely different endings. Two what? Completely different endings. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he suddenly just got up, got his shroud. When we die, we shroud ourselves. Got his shroud, gave it to his brother, and said, Sam'an wa ta'atan. I've heard and I'm going to obey. Take my shroud, the time is near. Went to his room, got Sahih al-Bukhari. He had a hair of the Prophet ﷺ, put it under his tongue, started reading Sahih al-Bukhari, and then he passed away. One Ilyas rahimahullah, he was reading Quran, and you know what verse he was reading when he passed away? وَكَانَ حَقٌّ عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. How would you translate that? To help the believers. وأنا Alimiya rahimahullah Nadwi, he was reading Surah Yasin and he passed away. Mawlana Islam al-Haq Sahib rahimahullah, he was in sajda, he was in prostration in Medina Munawwara on the 27th night of Ramadan, and he passed away. There was one young brother, and he went to someone who wasn't knowledgeable and said, I've done this and this and this and this, and is Allah going to forgive me? And the miskeen said to him, no, you're so bad, Allah's not going to forgive you. So the brother had this josh, and he said, it's like, I'm going to show you how Allah's going to forgive me. I ain't listening to you. Packed his bags, went for Umrah. As he was doing tawaf, gone, passed away. Ajib. The point being is that we don't know, do we, when we're going to go. But when we see Malak al-Maut, biggest regret is how we spent our time, and what will we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Just one more day, just one more moment, and I'll read salah, I'll do some dhikr, but look, time's now, it's done. We have this time now. So my message to you is, have periods of solitude, but when you're on your own, switch these devices off. Honest. You could go through a feed of TikTok or YouTube for 4 or 5 hours and you don't even know what you've watched. True, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What the heck have I watched? What have I done? It's been 3-4 hours. Whereas in that time you could have memorized something. You could have memorized the book of Allah, you could have memorized this, you could have learned something, you could have improved, read something to improve character, read something to improve your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or just read some salah. Like there's no it's not a hard equation, if you know what I mean. You get me? Allah give us tawfiq, inshallah. Hands up, who's going to do it? Who's going to do a day without their phone? Try it. A day without your phone, where you just put it on, you just put your phone and your messaging on, that's it. Now, how did you find it?
Yeah, I liked it.
What did you like about it?
Just not that pressure and that stress and when you were saying about the passage with go home and
Yep.
Obviously I don't know the exact wording, but like detach yourself and have the solitude. My mind was just thinking in the world that we live in now, when you said home, I was just thinking of these things as well, not just your physical home. Just for me, that resonated as automatically just the contact with other people and needless contact with other people, like you said, that doesn't serve a purpose. So that to me was like, yeah, your phone as well, everything, turn that off and just make sure that even if you're at home, you have, because for me, I could be at home, but then, like you said, I'm still doing stuff that doesn't.
And if you need it for like work or anything like that, just set a time. That between this time and this time I'm responding. Does that make sense? Yeah. Between this time, like what does my head in when people expect you to reply straight away. You know, it's like, hello, I have a life, you know, I might be doing something, you know, just maybe. You know, I'm not just lying down on my phone. But have it like this time, between this time and this time, this is when I'm checking my phone. Between this time and this time, this is when I'm going to check my emails. Well, I think it was a colleague at work, she said to me, most like WhatsApp messages, emails, it's just other people's rubbish dumped into you. There's some truth in that. But have a portion where only at this time. And I think it depends on your personality as well, but if a human being puts like, this is my time for this, this is my time for this, this is my time for this, and puts it in its place, you won't be what Imam Ghazali says is that most people, they're like headless chickens. They're just, life's like this for them. And they achieve nothing. So there's an axiom where they say there's a difference between movement and achievement. What's the difference?
One is just activity, like mindless activity.
Mindless activity, thinking you're achieving something, but you haven't actually achieved anything. You understand? And that's why it's really, really important actually to actually knuckle this down. Because these things are just destroying.
I think you made a bad dua against the live, but the phone's gone off.
Good. Alhamdulillah, stop it, man. No, but you know, like jokes aside, right? You know when we were all in lockdown, you know, there's people still to this day, they got so used to not having a masjid when it was locked down, they still don't go back to the masjid. Still to this day, even though there's bayans got back, this scholars are coming back into the masjid and they're teaching, and they're giving their talks. They're like, I'm just watch it on YouTube. I'll just watch the rerun. But you know, like sat here, like we've been sat here for the past hour, right? What do you gain here that you don't gain from these devices if you're listening to it on a stream? What do you not gain? Huh? Ukhuwa, and there's barakah in that. What else? Allah has angels that roam the turuq, looking for gatherings like this. And when they find them, they stack all the way up to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they mention my name, your name. And then we're forgiven. The hadith is long, but at the end of it, we're forgiven, inshallah. No one is left out from this majlis. That doesn't happen when you're watching it at home. Huh? Even the one at the back. La yashqa fihi al-jalis. No one is left out. Do you get me? And that's why these things, like, you know, okay, I'm doing it for you.
I don't know what you did to
Right? But we need to get rid of these things, man.
Dr. Death.
Alhamdulillah, I'm glad it's gone off. Does me head in.
This one's still on.
Hey?
Yeah, it's the normal recording still on, the live's gone off.
Good. Good. Alhamdulillah. Right, we'll stop. G, come on.
You touched on this point before. I don't think we really got into it. So how do you reconcile the worship in solitude versus the collective worship and doing things with the community?
Yeah, so basically, I think what the khulasa is from Imam Ghazali is companionship that is just wasteful, pointless, needless. You know, like, you know when there's like no faida, no benefit. whatsoever. I think what he's getting at, rahimahullah, is socializing.
Just going for a chill or whatever.
Yeah. Without any benefit. Now, human beings need to socialize from time to time. They do need to socialize from time to time. Yeah, I get that. But that shouldn't be like default. So your time with people is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense?
Well, I think you're talking about worship, aren't you? You mentioned worship.
Yeah.
Because this is just a snippet. If you read the Ihya, if you can read the Ihya al-Madin, he has an actual section on solitude, and what he says is actually solitude is important. Like you have to have a portion of solitude in your life, but don't let it slip away from classes, learning your religion, because you can't do that on your own. You have to have a teacher. You can't learn it on your own. So don't let it slip. Don't let that take you away from learning, teaching. So once you've learned something, you could actually excel and teach it. The third thing he talks about is enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. Don't let it distract you from that. The other thing that he talks about is communities, like civic involvement. But the benefits of being in solitude and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment, it prepares you for when you're in the company of people. What do I mean by that? Is that a human being will have what's called istihdar, is that they have this constant awareness that Allah is watching them, Allah is with them, and I have to behave. There's a decorum that I have to behave. In other words, the way Allah wants me to behave. So that when you're engaging with ilm, if you're studying or if you're teaching or if you're doing any community work, or if you're involved with the local masjid or if you're involved with links, you know what the decorum is and you're not two-faced. And that's the benefit of having that ibadat first. And some of the scholars of the past, like Sufyan al-Thawri, he said, we used to worship Allah for 20 years before we engaged in studying. Why? Because it would prepare our hearts for when we actually meet people or get around people. So be involved with community work, yeah, absolutely yes, but there's a decorum that comes with it. And that's what solitude does. When you're on your own and you engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it prepares you of how to behave in those moments. So life isn't just a chill. Because there's people, I know a brother, Allah, he said to me that he was talking to his wife, and while she's talking to him, he read the whole of Surah Al-An'am in his head.
So what was that?
He said he was talking to his wife, and while she's talking to him, he wasn't even there. Oh yeah. He read the whole of Surah Al-An'am is 1.25 juz.
What, 20 minutes, 25 minutes?
Just like Ajib yani.
Was there a reason why he was reading Surah
An'am, eh?
Was there a reason why he was reading
No idea. Muhammad ibn Wasi' rahimahullah, he 20 subhanallah kana yabki fil layl 20 sana wa imra'atuhu la ta'lamu bih. He 20 years he'd be up in the middle of the night weeping to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His wife had no idea. Some would fast perpetually. This is what solitude does. It prepares you for these things. Some would fast perpetually and their family wouldn't even know. They'd have no idea. They think they've had breakfast and this and that, and they'd oil their face so they wouldn't look withdrawn, and they'd put, like lip balm so the lips wouldn't look dry, and their family wouldn't know. They'd pretend to eat. So that decorum we were talking about, that once you master it when you're on your own, when you're in front of people. Mawlana Ilyas rahimahullah, he used to take Shaykh Zakaria rahimahullah to wherever he went for when he's invited to a guest's house. Because he used to say, Shaykh Zakaria rahimahullah, I'm fasting, but I don't want that person to be disappointed that I'm not going to their dawat. So you come with me, you eat. So they'd share a plate, and Mawlana Ilyas rahimahullah would make the morsels and pretend to eat, and Shaykh Zakaria would take them and eat it. And he said, I got double maza. Because he wasn't allowed to go anywhere unless it was with Mawlana Ilyas rahimahullah. So he goes, I got to go out, and I got to eat as well. Look at that. So in solitude, Shaykh Ilyas rahimahullah perpetually fast, When he's out in public, he recognizes this is the decorum that I need to have. So be involved, really, really important to be involved, but that legwork beforehand needs to be done. And the best time to do it, the best time to engage with Allah, in terms of if you want your portion of solitude, is when everybody else is asleep in the house. And if you have children, the best time is first thing in the morning. Wake up a little bit earlier than everybody else, an hour, 2 hours beforehand. Do what you need to do between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rest of the day is yours.
What if your kids don't sleep?
Yeah, I've been through that, bro. Yeah. I've been through that, yeah. No, those days will pass. Inshallah. No, they will. They'll pass. And then you get back into, and you have, Allah puts seasons in your life. You'll have a season of turbulence. And you'll think, gosh, I've done nothing. But I tell you, bro, those moments are much, when you're like, oh my God, my kids aren't sleeping, I got work, I got to do this, I'm so busy, I can't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That notion is more beloved to Allah than you spending a year and every night you're praying Qiyamul Layl and you're big-headed about it. You know that? That if you, those moments of, oh man, I'm tied up, I really want to, I can't, Allah, that notion is much more beloved to Allah than you doing everything and feeling good about it. So there's this thing called qabd and bast. Bast is when Allah gives you expansion. And the scholars, they say that when you feel expanded and you feel good between you and that's more problematic than when you feel constricted with you and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worrying about it. So that person who feels constricted with Allah and worried about that state is much, much more beloved than the one who has expansion or thinks they have expansion, because when you think you have expansion, you don't. But they think they're doing well with Allah and they're feeling good about it. It's much more of a worrying state to be in.
It's easy to slip and bust.
Ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah, he had Mubarak, one of our greatest scholars, he had a neighbor who he never used to do anything. He was a businessman, he just never used to do anything, he never used to see him in the masjid. And then when he passed away, I saw him swimming in the rivers of paradise. So I went to his wife and said, what does he do? I never saw him go do anything. And he said, every night he'd come home from a long day's work, he'd raise his hands and say, Allah, if I wasn't this busy, I'd be doing exactly what Abdullah ibn Mubarak does. Look how much Allah loved that. And he was sincere, wasn't he? It's like, Allah, if I wasn't as busy with my job, I'd be doing exactly what this Imam's doing. And Allah loved it so much. Abdullah saw him swimming in the rivers of paradise.
Just a practical question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about the phone, people need it for work or feel that they need it for work.
Yeah.
They should allocate some time.
Yep.
Is there a particular time? Because it seems like no time is really a good time. Like you don't want to do it in the morning.
Why?
As in time to use the phone.
Oh, time to use the phone. Yeah.
You don't want to. You want to use the morning for other things.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it last thing at night. When is the ideal?
For work?
Yeah.
During working
Just
times?
at work.
Yeah. Keep work at work. And don't bring it home. Yeah, ever. Keep work at work. Yeah. And the Prophet ﷺ made dua for the morning, for the ummah. There's more blessings early on in the day than towards the end. So my advice is for work is smash the morning as much as you can. The problem with emails is that they're very addictive because you get a response. It's like a jukebox. Like you press a button, you get a response. It's the same with emails because the replies that you get, for emails and messages. The reason why they're so addictive is because when you get a reply, it makes your dopamine go high because you're getting attention.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So the hack is when you do emails and messages is keep them short and sweet and close them.
I think that part of the problem is like a lot of work things now have, well, at least in my work, have moved to WhatsApp. So you sort of have to be in a WhatsApp group.
What's your profession?
I'm a doctor in a hospital.
So how much does it depend on it?
Just things like there might be work-related things, like such and such a meeting is happening.
That's cool.
Put a message in the group.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But you don't have to read it outside of work, do you? Or do you? Because I don't know.
It depends. Like, so they might. Maybe that's something I need to work on.
Yeah. Like, do you?
Find a way to.
That's the thing. Like, do I need to do this at this time? Because the thing is that we're always on the go.
I think it's an expectation, but it's not.
An expectation from who?
From other people.
Okay, so let's just say you don't fulfill that expectation.
So I
So
need to
what?
test it then. See what happens.
Yeah, what's the?
Work then. Outside of work. So, for example,
Well,
I'll
because
give you a
it's
I'll give you a concrete example.
Yeah,
They
go on.
might move us from like our country. You might move us from one place to another place if something's happened.
That's
whatever.
yeah.
They will just put that message in the WhatsApp group.
That's in work, right?
They will do it before work has started. Because
That's fine.
there's an expectation that people are on their phones and checking them. So I've had it in the past where I've not seen a message and I've spent an hour in the wrong, like talking to the wrong patient.
And what's the worst thing that's happened?
Just lost a bit of time basically.
And then?
Nothing.
There's your answer.
Nothing's happened to me.
Yeah.
Can you not just mute it and then allocate? I think that's what you're saying, like a time for yourself
Yeah.
to check it.
Yes,
you
that's
know,
what I'm saying.
before-
What is
Yeah,
that time?
rather than just have it constantly.
Work has to be during work times.
Work during work basically.
Work during work and nothing else.
Yeah. I think that's what part of it.
And then when it comes to friends and family, have set portion times. When it comes to friends like WhatsApp groups and stuff like that, it doesn't matter what people think of you. What matters is your relationship with Allah. That's it.
Something else.
Mm.
So you talked about people potentially causing more detriment sometimes than good.
Yeah.
So just focus on the worship and solitude as a priority. So when it comes to family, because you have obligations towards certain members of your family, what if there are members of your family that cause you to be distracted from Allah or cause detriment, but then there's still immediate family? How do you
Then
situate them into?
that's when you need a scholar to advise you how to be in that situation. But that's a really important question.
What was the question?
Were you on your phone? I was just saying that, like, when you've got family members, it could be difficult when they might be the people that are distracting you from Allah, or causing detriment, but they're still family, and you have to keep ties with kinship, and it could be immediate family, it could be your parents, whoever it might be. So how do you balance your duties towards them? You know, you want to spend time with them against the detriment that might be caused.
Based upon what I know, if you permit, based upon what I know is if you're doing it with the intention of Silatul Rahim, which is joining family ties, which is a religious obligation, then you will only need to do it as much as is required. As in, that's not to say when you're going to meet your family, then like read off a script. Do you get me? Like, but be natural.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, make it as though.
Like
You
the
know,
minimum to
if
fulfill.
you look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would sit amongst the Sahaba, the companions, radiallahu anhum, sometimes even when they would be talking about not necessarily beneficial stuff like jahili stuff, but things that they would get up to in their past life, before they changed, and he would just sit there and smile sometimes. So, as in, he was there, but eventually that was like. He was there to show them that I'm there, but at the same time, it wasn't as though he was influenced by them, but rather they were being influenced by him. As in, you get me? So as long as you have that presence, that you're doing it as an obligation, you're visiting your family, your cousins, your uncles, your aunties, at the same time as an obligation.
Not encouraging.
And you will only need to do it as much as you need to. Then you can excuse yourself. I'm sure.
Can you not be the one that's enjoining good and forbidding evil?
You can do, but you could with family, especially if they're older than you, you could ask yourself the question: Is it my place to do that? And a lot of the times, people that are older than you, that are family, just remember they've changed your nappies. They'd be like, well, "Who are you?" You know, that type of thing, right? So that might not be the place to do it. But what I would advocate is that things like when it's time to pray, you just pray, just get off and go. When it's time to, do, like for example, if something is on a screen that it's just not befitting to look at, you leave the room, or something like that. But what Mona is saying is that you should engage with family. Absolutely, yes, you should. You should. Yeah. But remember what we were talking about before, that when you engage with Allah in solitude, when it comes to those moments, you'll be present with Allah in those moments.
Also, especially the Naqshbandiyya, they have this concept of khalwat dar anjuman, as in being with Allah, being alone with Allah, being in solitude despite being like physically with other people. Like if you look at the hadith of the man who, one of the 7 who will be given the shade of Allah's arsh on the Day of Judgment, رجل قلبه معلق بالمساجد. He didn't necessarily say the
في مساجد.
He didn't say the person who stays in the masajid, rather the person whose heart was attached in the masajid. So I think overall, if you can correct me, but it's about the state of being, as like you're there with your family, but it's not like you're not influenced by them in the sense that it's just petty socializing for the sake of socializing, but socializing for something good, as in socializing as in checking up on them, asking how they are, making sure that if there's anything that you can help with, that's a good thing, that's rewarding, so that's beneficial. Allahu Alam.
Yeah. Secret of a Sufi. Nice.
I guess you also have to be careful of being difference between being righteous and being self-righteous.
Yes, you're right, 100%. And the biggest, the people who are guilty of this is people who think they're righteous.
Right.
Because there's people outwardly, they look beautiful, but inwardly it's hideous. Now this, and men and women. Some people are very devoted, and they might not look like they're devoted, but they're very devoted, and their hearts are, you envy those hearts that they have. I had a brother yesterday who said, I've done 73,000 salah. On the outward, you wouldn't have thought he's done 73,000 salah catching. Yeah. Because remember, the one who has regret and remorse at their sins is much more beloved to Allah than the one who thinks he's something. Much, much more beloved to Allah. And the other thing we forget is that everybody's on a journey. Every human being is on a journey. So what you found easy in engaging with Allah, just because you found it easy doesn't make you anything. It doesn't make you anything. That other person, whatever journey they're on, you don't know their end, and that's why some of our teachers have said when it comes to Jannah in paradise, there's going to be so many surprises. My God, you were Muslim. Him. You just have no idea who's who. Never judge anybody. Yeah, never be self-righteous that I'm something. Never. Kabini. It's a big problem. ما من عالم يغتر بعلمه إلا حرم الله له التوفيق. Never does a person of knowledge think that there's something, except Allah snatches away from them divine ability, enabling grace to act on their knowledge. ما من صاحب العلم يغتر بماله إلا سلب له المصيبة في المال. Never does someone who Allah graced them with wealth think that there's something big, except Allah gives them a musibah in their wealth, a problem with their wealth. It'll just suck the money out of them in no time. ما من مدعي يغتر بهدايته إلا حرم الله له الخشوع. Someone who calls to Allah, never does that person have a sense of pride within them about what they're doing, except Allah takes away from them presence in their worship. Humility be between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's frightening. Never does someone, scholars, they say that someone who acts with haughtiness, they will not die until Allah humiliates them. They will not die until Allah humiliates them. Those who have fraudulent behavior, the scholars have said, we've usually found them that they die while they've soiled themselves. It's really frightening. This is a good point brother made about self-righteousness. Just switch it off. We're nothing. We're insignificant. Because everything that we're able to do is because of Allah's grace. Nothing to do with me, or you, and I. It's true, isn't it? It's just Allah's grace.
ما كنا لنهتدي لولا
Dawla and hadan Allah. And that's why we say, La after in the azan, why is it La hawla hayya ala salah? And after that, what do we say? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So there's no power or might in ability to do good and stay away from harm except through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah give us tawfiq.